In the heat of a high-stakes Valorant final, a familiar voice from the enemy team didn't just cost us the game. It resurrected a family ghost thought lost for 20 years. The sweat was beading on my forehead, stinging my eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it, the final round. We were tied 2-2 in the grand finals of the regional Valorant tournament. $5,000 on the line, but more than that, bragging rights for the entire year. My squad, the Voidwalkers, were counting on me. I was the shot caller, the one who kept a cool head when everything was on fire. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a frantic but precise rhythm I'd spent thousands of hours perfecting. "They're pushing B site. I hear 3 sets of footsteps," my teammate Leo hissed through the comms. "Smoke the entrance now, Steve." "On it," I muttered, my eyes glued to the screen. My character model slid around a corner, and I unleashed a perfect smoke orb that billowed out, obscuring the enemy's vision. My mouse hand was steady, my breathing controlled. I was in the zone. In this world, I was king. That's when the smell of warm chocolate chip cookies wafted into my room, a familiar and comforting scent that, for a split second, broke my concentration. My grandma, she was the best, always supportive of my computer hobby, as she called it. She didn't understand the tournaments or the screaming into a microphone, but she understood that I loved it, and that was enough for her. She knew this was a big match. The door creaked open. "Stevie, honey," she whispered, not wanting to distract me. "Just a little something for energy." I didn't turn around. Couldn't. "Thanks, Graham," I said, my voice tight with focus. "Just put it on the desk." Out of my peripheral vision, I saw her place a small plate piled with cookies next to my monitor. She lingered for a moment, her presence a silent, warm blanket. "2 down!" Chloe, our sniper, yelled in my ear. "1 tagged in heaven!" The adrenaline surged back, erasing everything else. We had this. We just had to hold. Then, a new voice crackled through the enemy team's open comms. It was a feature of this tournament client. You could hear the other team for a few seconds after a kill. Usually it was just a string of curses or frantic, useless call-outs. This voice was different. It was calm, almost amused. "Nice try, kids," the voice said, a low, gravelly sound with a strange, familiar rasp. "Gotta be quicker than that." I registered it, but dismissed it. Just some random dude on the other team. We traded fire. I took one down, but another got me. I slammed my fist on the desk in frustration, the plate of cookies rattling. Now it was all down to Leo. "He's planting the spike," I shouted into my mic, watching his screen. "He's behind the box, Leo, go!" Leo charged in. It was a one-on-one. The whole tournament came down to this. The tension was unbearable. My grandma was still standing by the door, watching, her brow furrowed in a sweet, confused concern. Then the enemy player with the gravelly voice spoke again. He must have hit his push-to-talk key by accident. It wasn't directed at the game. It sounded like he was talking to someone in his own room. "Yeah, I'm almost done," he chuckled. "Just schooling some kids. Tell Lizzie Bear I'll call her back. I promise." My blood ran cold. Lizzie Bear. No one called my mom that. No one except... No. It was impossible. It was a name I'd only ever heard in hushed stories, a name that belonged to a ghost, a faded photograph on my grandma's mantelpiece. My Uncle Mark, her son. He'd had a massive fight with my grandpa 20 years ago, stormed out, and was never heard from again. He was a family wound that had never healed, a black hole of grief my grandma orbited every single day. I must have misheard. A coincidence? It had to be. But then I heard a sound that wasn't from the game, a sharp, sickening crack of ceramic on hardwood. I ripped my headset off, my ears ringing in the sudden silence of my room. The game, the tournament, the money, it all evaporated. My grandma was standing frozen, her hand covering her mouth. The plate lay shattered at her feet, cookies scattered across the floor like fallen soldiers. Her face was as white as a sheet, and her eyes, wide with a horror I'd never seen before, were locked on my speakers. Tears were streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, silent and devastating. "Gram?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is it? What's wrong?" She didn't look at me. She just pointed a shaky finger at the speakers, from which the faint sounds of the game were still emanating. Her voice was a choked, broken whisper, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief, and a pain so deep it stole the air from the room. "Mark!" And through the speakers, that calm, gravelly voice spoke again, clear as day, cutting through the chaos of the game. It wasn't a pre-recorded line, it wasn't a coincidence, it was a direct response, impossibly, to the heartbroken woman standing in my doorway. "Hi, Mom." The world tilted on its axis. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the universe was the frantic digital gunfire from my speakers, a meaningless, tinny backdrop to the cataclysm that had just detonated in my bedroom. My grandma staggered back, her hand flying to her chest as if to keep her heart from bursting out. Her legs gave way, and she started to crumple. I moved without thinking. The headset was torn from my head and flung onto my bed. The game, the $5,000, the championship, it all ceased to exist. I lunged forward and caught her just before she hit the floor, her body suddenly frail and weightless in my arms. I half carried, half dragged her to my gaming chair, easing her into it. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at the speakers as if they were a portal to another dimension. "Mark," she breathed again, the name a prayer and a curse on her lips. "My son." Meanwhile, my headset, discarded on my bed, was squawking with rage. I could hear the distorted, tinny voices of my teammates. "Steve! What the hell, man?" Leo's voice was sharp with betrayal. "You just stood there. We lost. You literally just threw the entire finals." "Dude, what is wrong with you?" Chloe added, her usual calm demeanor shattered. $5 grand, Steve. You just cost us $5 grand. I didn't care. I didn't even hear them, not really. They were voices from a different life, one I'd inhabited just a minute ago. I knelt in front of my grandma, taking her icy hands in mine. They were trembling violently. "Gram, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my own voice from shaking. "It's a mistake. It's some kid online, a weird coincidence. It's not him." But I didn't believe it. "Lizzie Bear." "Hi, Mom." The rasp in his voice. It was the same rasp from the old home videos, the ones Grandma would watch on his birthday every year, sobbing quietly in the dark living room. It was him. It felt like him. But how? After 20 years of absolute silence? Presumed dead by everyone except her? The post-game lobby screen popped up on my monitor. Defeat. The word blared in bright red letters. Below it, a list of players. On the enemy team, one username stood out. Ghost_20. 20 years. The coincidence was too cruel, too specific. My grandma squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. "I have to hear him again, Stevie," she pleaded, her voice raw with a desperate, terrifying hope. "Please." I have to know. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. What if I was wrong? What if this was some elaborate sadistic prank? Exposing my grieving grandmother to that would be unforgivable. But what if it wasn't? What if, by some miracle of the universe, my long-lost uncle was on the other end of a Valorant server? I made a decision. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly, and grabbed my headset. I slipped it over my ears, the angry messages from my teammates instantly flooding my senses. I ignored them, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I muted Leo and Chloe, my friends, my team. They didn't matter right now. I found Ghost_20's profile and clicked Add Friend and Message. My hands hovered over the keys. What do you type to a ghost? How do you even begin to ask a question like that? You there? I typed, then immediately deleted it. Too casual. Who are you? Deleted. Too aggressive. This is going to sound insane, but my grandmother is here. Before I could finish typing, a notification popped up. Ghost20 has accepted your friend request. And then another one. Ghost20 has invited you to a private voice lobby. My breath hitched. I clicked accept. For a moment, there was only static. Then his voice, the gravelly, impossible voice, filled my ears, no longer filtered through the chaos of the game's comms. It was clearer now, older, but unmistakably the same. Look, kid, GG, he said, his tone a little confused. But you guys kinda fell apart at the end there. Your boy just froze. You okay? I couldn't speak. My throat was a desert. I swallowed hard. You said something. During the match. Yeah? I talk. It's a team game, he said, a hint of wary amusement in his tone. What about it? You said, hi, Mom. The silence on the other end was heavy, absolute. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Then he let out a short, incredulous laugh. What? No, I didn't. You misheard me, kid. My grandma, I pushed, my voice cracking. She's here. She heard you. She thought you were her son. Another pause, longer this time. Listen, man, I don't know what kind of prank this is, but it's not funny. My mom passed away years ago. My heart sank. It was a mistake. A horrible, cruel trick of sound and grief. I was about to apologize, to log off and delete the game and maybe never touch my computer again, when my grandma, who had been listening intently, let out a choked sob from my chair. My little sparrow, she whispered, the sound so faint I almost didn't hear it. But the microphone on my headset was sensitive. It picked up everything. The man on the other end went utterly still. The air crackled with tension. I heard him take a sharp, ragged breath, like he'd been punched in the gut. The silence stretched for an eternity, thick with 20 years of unspoken words and unimaginable pain. Then his voice came through again, but it was completely different. It was stripped of all its earlier confidence. It was fragile, broken, and trembling with a disbelief that mirrored my own. Sunshine? Is that you? My grandma gasped, a sound torn from the deepest part of her soul. Sparrow and Sunshine. The pet names, the ones etched into the back of the single photograph she kept by her bedside. A smiling young man with my eyes, and a woman who looked like a younger, brighter version of the trembling lady in my chair. It was them. It was real. I felt like an intruder in the most sacred moment of their lives. I gently took the headset off my own head and placed it over my grandma's silver hair. Her hands came up instantly, cupping the earpieces as if they were the most precious objects on earth. I couldn't hear what he was saying anymore, but I didn't need to. I could see it all on her face. Her expression shifted through a storm of emotions. Disbelief melted into dawning recognition. The deep-etched lines of grief on her face seemed to soften, replaced by a raw, vulnerable hope. Tears streamed freely now, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were something else entirely. She started talking, her voice soft and halting at first, then gaining strength, the words tumbling out as if a dam had broken after 20 long years. She talked about my grandpa's passing 5 years ago, how he'd asked for Mark with his last breath. She talked about my mom, Lizzie Bear, and her 2 kids, me and my sister. She talked about his old room, untouched, waiting for him. A monologue of a life lived in his absence, a desperate attempt to fill a 2-decade-long silence in a single conversation. Through the faint sound leaking from the earpieces, I could hear the low murmur of his voice responding, a gravelly counterpoint to her high, emotional cadence. I watched, mesmerized, as my grandma laughed, a real, genuine laugh that reached her eyes, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Then she would cry, then laugh again through the tears. It was heartbreaking and beautiful and utterly surreal. A ghost was being resurrected through a fiber-optic cable and a video game. My phone started buzzing violently on the desk. A string of texts from Leo. "Dude, answer me." What the hell was that? Are you having a breakdown? We're at the lobby. They're waiting to give out the prize money. The other team is asking for you. The other team. Ghost 20's team. My uncle's team. The thought was so bizarre, I almost laughed out loud. He was here. Not physically, but he was in the same digital space. He might be 100 miles away, or he might be just across town. I looked back at my grandma. She was completely lost in her world, her conversation with her long-lost son. She had one hand pressed to the monitor, her fingers gently tracing the username Ghost_20 on the screen, as if she could feel him through the glass. This was everything. The tournament, my angry friends. It was all just noise. An idea, insane and impulsive, sparked in my mind. He was right there. I couldn't just let him disappear again into the anonymity of the internet. I couldn't let my grandma's heart be broken a second time. I had to do something. I grabbed my phone and typed a reply to Leo. Something insane is happening. I can't explain. Stall them. Ask the other team where they're playing from. Say it's for a friendly rematch or something. Just find out. Leo's reply was instant. Are you kidding me, Steve? They're about to get on stage. Please, Leo, it's more important than the money. It's life or death. I'm not kidding. I must have sounded truly unhinged, because after a moment he replied, Fine. Don't know what you're playing at, but fine. My attention snapped back to the computer. The private voice lobby was still active. My grandma was now listening intently, a small, sad smile on her face. What if he logged off? What if the connection dropped? The fragile thread connecting our lives would be severed. I had to secure it. I opened the text chat in the voice lobby, my fingers flying. This is her grandson, Steve. Don't hang up. Please. Where are you? There was no immediate reply. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe he was ignoring me. My grandma started speaking again, her voice tender. Oh, Mark, I've missed your voice so much. The panic was a cold claw in my stomach. I needed a location, an address, a city, anything. I typed again, more frantically this time. We need to see you. She needs to see you. Still nothing. My phone buzzed again, It was Leo. Got it. The tournament admin told me. They're a local team. They're all playing from one guy's house. He gave me the address so we can send them a pizza or whatever as a good game gesture. My heart stopped. An address. He sent me an address. I didn't even read it. My eyes were glued to the screen, to the chat box, waiting for a sign, any sign, from the ghost in the machine. Then, finally, 3 words appeared in the chat from Ghost_20. 3 words that made the floor drop out from under me. 3 words that changed everything. I'm not sure. Not sure. What did that mean? Not sure he wanted to see us? Not sure it was a good idea? The ambiguity was terrifying. He was slipping away. I could feel it. He had a new life, a new world. We were a complication, a ghost from his past, just as he was to us. Just then, my grandma took off the headset, her eyes swimming with a universe of emotions. She looked at me, her face pale but resolute. "Stevie," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "He's scared. He thinks we'll hate him." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "He won't tell me where he is." My phone buzzed in my hand one last time. I looked down at the screen, at the address Leo had sent me. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't across the country. It wasn't even in another state. It was a 15-minute drive away. I looked from the address on my phone to the heartbroken woman in my chair, then back to the screen where the ghost of her son was about to vanish for good. He was scared. He was close. And he was about to run. I had one chance, right now, to stop him. "Get your coat, Graham," I said, my voice coming out with a calmness that defied the hurricane raging in my chest. "We're going for a drive." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. "Stevie," he said, "no. He's not ready." "He doesn't have to be ready," I replied, grabbing my car keys from the hook by the door. "He just has to be there." I scooped up my phone, the address from Leo glowing like a beacon on the screen. There was no time to second guess, no time for doubt. Every second we waited was another second he could talk himself out of this. Another second he could log off and disappear back into the ether for another 20 years. That wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. I helped my grandma to her feet, her movements slow and unsteady, as if she were walking in a dream. We didn't speak on the way to the car. The silence was thick with unspoken questions, with the monumental weight of 2 decades of grief and a future that had suddenly, impossibly, cracked open. The drive was the longest 15 minutes of my life. The suburban streets, usually so familiar, felt alien and strange. Every red light was a personal torment, every slow driver a villain in my story. I glanced over at my grandma. She was staring out the window, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. She was tracing patterns on the fogged-up glass, just like she used to when I was a kid. She was terrified. But beneath the fear, I saw a flicker of something else, the fierce, unyielding resolve of a mother about to find her son. I pulled up to the address. It was a perfectly ordinary house in a perfectly ordinary cul-de-sac. Beige siding, a basketball hoop in the driveway, a minivan parked at the curb. There were lights on inside. Somewhere in that house, a man was sitting in front of a computer, completely unaware that his entire past was parked on the street outside. "What do we do now?" my grandma whispered, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath. "We knock on the door." We walked up the concrete path together, my hand on the small of her back to steady her. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. What if we were wrong? What if Leo got the address wrong? What if this was all some colossal, heartbreaking mistake? I raised my hand and knocked. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. We waited. A minute passed that felt like an hour. Then we heard movement inside. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. A young guy, maybe a year or two older than me, stood there. He was holding a slice of pizza. Can I help you?" he asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. It wasn't him. My heart sank. We're looking for someone," I stammered, feeling foolish. "A friend." He was playing a game online with us. His username is Ghost_20. The guy's eyes widened in recognition. "Oh, you mean Mark? Dude, you're Steve? From the Void Walkers? Your team just bailed on the awards. What was that all about?" He then looked past me at my grandma, who was half hidden in the shadows of the porch. "Mark! Hey, man, your pizza's getting cold, and there are some people here for you," he yelled back into the house. And then he appeared. He walked into the hallway, drawn by the commotion. He was older, of course. His hair was thinner, streaked with gray at the temples. The laugh lines around his eyes were deeper. But it was him. The same eyes from the photograph. The same strong jaw. He froze when he saw us, the slice of pizza in his hand forgotten. His face went pale. He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, and then his gaze landed on my grandma. The world stopped. For him, it was a ghost on his doorstep. For her, it was the answer to 20 years of prayers. "Mark?" my grandma breathed, and the single word was filled with a lifetime of love and pain. He didn't speak. He just stared, his eyes filling with tears. The tough, gravelly-voiced gamer who had dominated the match was gone. In his place was a man completely undone, a boy who had finally come home. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. My grandma met him in the middle of the doorway. Her arms went around his neck, and she buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking with silent, racking sobs. His own arms wrapped around her frail frame, holding her tight, as if he was afraid she would disappear if he let go. "Sunshine," he choked out, his voice thick and broken. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." I stood back, giving them their space, my own vision blurring with tears. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the guy who opened the door. "Dude," he whispered, his voice full of awe, "I think you just won something bigger than a tournament." And he was right. As I watched my grandmother and her son, my uncle, reunite under the warm glow of a porch light, 20 years of silence and what-ifs melting away in a single desperate embrace, I knew that no prize money, no trophy, no championship title could ever feel as good as this. We hadn't won the game, but in that moment, my family had won back its future. The ghost was home.